Good morning all, and welcome to today's webinar on energising and extending your organisation through strategic partnerships, hosted by Hugh Thomas-Davies of Hesys Sustainability Services. My name is Matthew. I'm the Low Carbon Officer for Buckinghamshire. I work for Buckinghamshire Business First. You can see my photo and our logo at the bottom of the first screen. Thank you for taking the time to participate today, and extending and energising your organisation through strategic partnerships should be a very interesting topic and very pertinent at the moment. I will do a short intro just now, and we'll hand over to Hugh for the main part. Before we start, could I just remind you, for those of you who don't know, who Buckinghamshire Business First are and how we can help your business. We're an organisation with 12,000 members across Buckinghamshire and neighbouring counties. There's lots of ways to get involved and make the most of a membership, which can be free or paid for. We have an events programme with webinars such as these, masterclasses, talks, and larger events such as the Bucks Business Expo and the Bucks Skills Show. Unfortunately, they won't be taking place this year, but hopefully next year we'll be back to a fully fledged events programme. We also have an offers page where businesses can advertise special offers and services to other BBF members, which I would encourage you to look at, particularly at the moment around COVID-19 disruption. There's a number of very interesting offers from Buckinghamshire businesses to help with the challenges that those conditions present. We also have a regular newsletter to keep you up to date on the newsfeed from BBF and the membership. Again, which is very helpful at the moment, given the volume of business support that's out there. And during these difficult times, when businesses are affected in so many ways, we have lots of support on offer ourselves. Just quickly run through a business support team, which can offer help with advice, funding and finance. We have our own grant schemes, the Growth Programme and the Low Carbon Workspaces Programme, which I work for. There's also a Recovery and Investment Fund that's live at the moment and accepting applications for grants of between £3,000 and £120,000, covering 75% of projects. And this is one of the most generous schemes available nationally to help businesses come through COVID-19 with more resilient and stronger prospects. I'll skip a couple of the other points and just let you know that if you'd like some more information on low carbon workspaces, you can find it at www.lowcarbonworkspaces.co.uk. We're a grant scheme that can offer up to £5,000 to cover a wide range of energy saving projects and upgrades to commercial premises. And if you'd like some more information on that, you can reach me via that website. Thank you very much. Now to hand over to Hugh.
Thank you very much, Matthew. I'll skip to the next slide. Just a short introduction on me. I'm a sustainability and collaboration advocate. I have a big vision. My vision is to help the clients that I'm working with reduce their carbon dioxide emissions by 100,000 tonnes by 2025 from a 2019 baseline. So far, progress on this has been limited, so I still have a long way to go. My background is that I'm originally a technical person. I was originally a systems programmer on IBM mainframes at 3M, and spent 6 years at the European Space Agency in Holland and then in Germany. My background for most of the last 20 years, though, has been working on business partnerships and alliances for high-tech companies mainly, including Oracle, Symantec, Siemens, IBM, and a number of startups. I've also worked in manufacturing, doing the installation and shipping of specialist technical desks that are used for broadcasting, and also in the control rooms of utilities. So the objectives of this session are to cover what partnerships are, why organizations partner with each other. We'll look at a few examples on those partnerships, and including ones that are based on the circular economy. I'll be talking about the 3 laws of partnering, look at the partnering life cycle, and some ideas on how to identify potential partners and start conversations with them. The intention is that this is hopefully going to provide some practical advice, which hopefully will give you some new ideas and direction on on how to take your business and collaborate with third parties. So a little bit about Hesys. We support and inspire SMEs to build a better and more sustainable future by aligning with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, and through collaboration with others to extend their reach. So what we can do is we can suggest ways of reducing an organization's waste and carbon footprint, help with broader SDG alignment and stakeholder engagement, and then also help with organizations reaching capabilities through helping to develop a partnering strategy. We're based in Buckinghamshire, in fact, just outside Princess Risborough, and I have been here for almost over 25 years now. So just for those of you who aren't familiar with this, these are the Sustainable Development Goals. The ones that I've focused on really are 12 and 13, which is responsible consumption and production, which really is all about waste and waste reduction as far as well, it covers much broader than that, but I'm really interested in waste reduction and climate action, which is again a broad topic, but as far as I'm concerned, really I'm keen to try and do what I can to help reduce carbon dioxide and greenhouse gas emissions. In addition, I'm working with WaterAid, which is goal number 6, and goal number 6 also impacts on goals 1 to 5, which if you have to collect water in parts of the world where there is no running water, then it impacts on a variety of other things as well, including education, because often children have to do that. It means walking to a source of water and missing out on lessons, and has a whole load of other impacts as well. So just a brief introduction to the SDGs. So what is a partnership? This is a term that's got lots of different uses. If I talk to my friend who's a solicitor, he's had different, he subscribes to a completely different view of what a partnership is. But in the context of this presentation, it's a mutually beneficial and contributing relationship. Generally, it has, or it should have, a common purpose, shared rewards and risks, and partners generally bring complementary expertise and resources to the collaboration. So that's my definition of a partnership. So why should any organization consider partnering? Well, it can extend the organization's capabilities, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in due course. We can help through partnering to fill gaps as an alternative to building or buying capability. So organizations, when they're growing, can look at their growth in a number of different ways. They can actually buy that capability by hiring additional people or buying additional resource. But they can also consider partnering as a way of achieving the same objective. Potentially it's lower costs and extended reach. We can also use partners to help mitigate risk by supporting areas where perhaps our organization or our business doesn't have the skills or the credibility. In circular applications, and this is a really exciting one for me, we use waste for one organization to create something new for another. And I will talk a little bit about a couple of examples of that in a moment. We also help organizations in the value chain reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and waste through partnerships. And lastly, but by no means least, partnering can also support creativity and innovation. And that's because you're working with a different group of people. They bring a set of different experiences and ideas to the collaboration. And it is really an interesting way of finding an innovative direction to move forward. So those are a few reasons why partnering. I'm sure there are stacks more, but this is my starting point. So I thought it might be helpful to talk through a few examples. And I've got a few on this list. So Ford and Centrica. Well, Ford have just started on the electric vehicle path, in the sense that they're starting to sell electric vehicles, and they've partnered with Centrica. And Centrica, obviously, as a utility, they can provide the electric vehicle charging capability. They can provide the infrastructure not only for the end users or the end purchasers of the electric vehicles, but they also provide the EV charging infrastructure for the for dealerships themselves. So that's a kind of interesting one that that I stumbled across a few weeks ago. Red Bull and GoPro, by comparison, though, are all about the marketing. This is about the collaboration of Red Bull, the energy drink, with GoPro, who is the manufacturer of cameras that are used for sports and recreation. So particularly you see GoPros attached to people's bike helmets as they go charging down the mountain on the mountain bike. Well, Red Bull and GoPro are supporting each other's brands with a joint marketing campaign, or have done. Another example is Oxford University and AstraZeneca. Well, this is a very topical partnership at the moment because Oxford University is working on a COVID-19 vaccine. AstraZeneca provides the manufacturing capability, so the ability to scale to producing very large quantities of this vaccine that when it's developed and has been tested will obviously be in huge demand. The next example is one I'm very familiar with because I was involved in this and I led this in Europe for 2 years. So the partnership between Apple and IBM. This was all about app development on mobile devices. So for Apple users, that's iPads and iPhones, and using those and the apps that are associated with those to change the way that people work. And I will talk a little bit more about that in a second. Now, Toast Ale and Eat. This is a favorite one of mine. Toast Ale is a small brewer based in South London, just very close to the Shard, actually. And they use waste bread to as an ingredient for their beer. And they had a collaboration with Eat to support that process. So Eat would provide them with their waste bread, so the crusts usually, and then Toast would then use those as a ingredient in the beer. And then the last one on this list is Sky Ocean Rescue and Worldwide Wildlife Fund. So this is all about protecting and restoring the oceans. Really interesting story. You can see it on their website, but it's great to see the collaboration between those two organizations. And by the way, Sky Ocean Rescue, a great story about how they eliminated plastic from their business, single-use plastic. This is a screenshot from the Sky Ocean Rescue website, in which they talk about some of their other partners as well. So Worldwide Wildlife Fund is at the bottom on the left. They also have a collaboration with the Premier League, and the Premier League collaboration is all around the removal of single-use plastic cups from Premier League grounds. And so far, according to the press release, they have 10 Premier League clubs that have done that, and they've replaced these cups with returnable cups. And then the third example on this is National Geographic. And National Geographic is supporting the work of Sky Ocean Rescue by publishing stories associated with it. So interesting tie-up there between Sky as a broadcaster and National Geographic as a producer of print and also other types of media as well. So Apple and IBM. So I can talk with great confidence about this because I was heavily involved. The origins of this was that Apple were keen to expand their footprint into the enterprise from their presence in consumer. So Apple had already got a very good presence in the consumer area. So individuals have been buying iPhones and iPads, but they hadn't got such a strong presence in the enterprise, so within business, and they really wanted to do that to gain some traction there. IBM had a mobile practice, but they wanted something to differentiate what they did in the marketplace. So there was a collaboration between the two, and the idea behind this was that by using Apple devices and IBM development skills, they believed that the partnership could change the way that people work, and it did. It did. It was very transformational. We, over the 2 years that I was involved, we delivered over 200 new apps to probably 150 different customers. A lot of airlines were involved in this, and the apps that we sold into the airline industry were very transformational in the sense that they changed the way that cabin crew operated by providing them with an iPad and an app. So if you were on a transatlantic flight, for example, the cabin crew member could go and talk to you, and they knew your name, they knew which seat you were in. They also knew what preferences you might have had. They also knew that if you were going to miss your connecting flight, then they could perhaps proactively work with you to rebook onto a later flight to ensure that you ended up in the right destination without having to queue for hours, like I've done in the past, in an airport, trying to get myself rebooked or get themselves rebooked on a connecting flight. The other ways it helped was that with the engineering teams, instead of using manuals, they had a lot of data about the aircraft on their iPads. They also provided iPads to the gate staff to help them with the boarding, again with an app which provided a lot of information about individual passengers. So really transformational and exciting to be involved with that, actually. So toast, ale and eat, this is another one I find very exciting. So this is the fresh bread, or using the surplus fresh bread to turn into beer. It's a really exciting topic because food waste is a huge issue, and this is one way of reducing that food waste. The other interesting area that for me was not only did Eat provide the bread, but Eat was also stocking the beer in their outlets, and so they were selling it. They were providing the bread to Toast, and Toast was brewing it into beer and then providing the beer back to Eat to sell in their outlets. So really exciting circular story. The only unfortunate part of it is that Eat have now been acquired by Pret, so that's not happening anymore. So what happened was Toast Ale had to do something different. So they've now partnered with Warburtons, and they are taking misshapen crumpets and turning them into a special brew as well. So it's interesting to me, the kind of innovation that you're seeing in a variety of different areas. So question is really, why do you want to partner? And there are lots of different reasons for this, and this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but there are some really good reasons. So create a new combined offering or service. So that you could say is the example of Apple and IBM. They wanted a new offering. They also, you could argue, they were also addressing complex challenges through this partnership, but it's often the case that complex challenges can't be solved by individual organizations. That's when a new method of working needs to kick in. So partnerships is a really interesting way of doing that. Accessing new markets. Well, clearly, if you've got a different offering, it does potentially give you access to new markets as well. The 1 + 1 = 3. So my maths isn't great, but I know that that's not the case. And the point of this is actually to say that the collaboration between organizations should be greater than the sum of the parts. Paul Polman, the former chief executive of Unilever, I saw in an interview, was saying that, you know, collaboration is not just 1 + 1 = 3, it's 1 + 1 = 11. So it's significantly a multiplier, potentially, if you get the partnership right, of the capabilities of your particular organization. Obviously, there's marketing opportunities as well. There's the possibility of stimulating innovation, which we've already mentioned. You know, the whole idea of finding new ways and using the creative processes from two organizations working together. And by the way, I do mention two organizations. I have been in situations where we've tried to bring 3 organizations together. It's never worked very well. And the reason for that is that you have 3 different sets of objectives, and it becomes quite complicated to ensure that everybody's objectives are being met. So I'm not saying it could never work, but in my experience, it's significantly harder to do a 3-way partnership than it is to do a 2. So those are some ideas on why potentially anybody would want to partner. The question is next, well, who do you want to partner with? Are there, for example, some complementary businesses that that you could work with that potentially are similar in nature and share the same market? Or are they different from one another but sell to one another, creating a chain? So in my work in a manufacturing company, for example, there was the desks that we supplied to a broadcaster, for example, were then wired up by a third party, and they would install all the electronics into these things. And by the way, you see these kind of desks when you watch the news in the background. You'll see desks with monitors attached to them and so on. It's that kind of thing that we were making. But it would be great actually to build a partnership between the desk manufacturer and the organization doing the wiring for a variety of different reasons. So one is because if you're collaborating together, then it means that the customer only has to deal with one organization, because the one would take the lead and be the prime for the relationship. But the other good reason is that the desks can be more tuned in and even better engineered to support the wiring process. And the other aspect to this is that if you're going to be collaborating with an organization that you're that you would typically sell to, then there is there is also the possibility that you can that you don't necessarily have to invest so much in terms of your own sales resource in that kind of scenario. You also can sell components or work with organizations that contribute to a common stack, which becomes an overall solution. So similar idea really, that you have multiple things that are come together as a solution. And it doesn't have to be as complicated as the desks and electronics. It could be just adding two things together that makes something even more interesting. And of course, the last one is back to the toast example, have a waste product that another organization could use. So if you're throwing something away, is it something that could be used as an input for somebody else? So there are a couple of diagrams here. So there's one here which is around, supposed to be a useful diagrammatic example of the type of organizations you could partner with. So they could be complementary or they could be similar organizations to yours. And it may, if they're similar organizations to yours, do they have a different geographic or focus, in which case that could be ideal. So there are lots of different possibilities. So the questions that I would ask you to ask yourselves are, do you meet the same organizations in several of your clients? So is that a potential situation where you could work with another party? Is there somebody in an adjacent space to your company that has a that has a proposition that you could leverage? And if so, how could you help each other? And I mention how you can help each other because the important thing in this is that it's a win-win. If it's not a win-win, then it's a challenge to keep things going. But we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. So this is another way of looking at it, a partnering opportunity matrix. If you look at the strengths of your particular organization, you can highlight those. There are probably some things that you can do that other people can do that would be categorized as commodity. There are also differentiators, which are things that you do really well that maybe other organizations don't have. Potentially there are also some weaknesses, and the weaknesses are things that are areas where potentially you could use a third party to really strengthen your own proposition in that space. So there are things that a third party could do to really address this area of weakness, and that might be a good place to start as a look to see how you can develop further. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the 3 laws of business partnerships. This is not something that I've invented. This has come from a book called The Remix Strategy, The 3 Laws of Business Combinations. And it articulates this very well, I think. The first law is the combination must have the potential to create more value alone than either partner could. Sorry, let me read that again. The combination must have the potential to create more value than either partner could alone. So in other words, this 1 + 1 = 3. The second law is the way of governing this collaboration. So the combination must be designed and managed to realize the joint value of the collaboration. And the third one is the value must be shared. So if it's not a win-win, then it's going to be difficult to motivate all parties to continue with a partnership. So the first law, what's the joint value? So these are a couple of examples here. Business owners can support their teams by purchasing elegant, easy to use transformational apps and Apple devices from IBM. So the idea there was that one organization was selling, so it was IBM, but they were designed and built in a collaboration with Apple, and they were transformational. IBM couldn't have done it on its own. Apple couldn't have done it on its own. beer lovers can buy toast ale brewed with waste bread provided by Eat From Eat stores. Well, that's another great story. So the question is, who are your end users and customers? What is the need that they're trying to meet, and how would you measure your success? So with IBM, then it was clearly based on how successful we were, how many apps that we'd delivered. With Toast Ale, then it's going to be related to the creation of the and brewing of the beer. And for Eat, then it's, you know, how much are they going to sell in their stores, and how much bread have they saved from being wasted. So the sources of joint value are, and I'm not going to go through this slide in detail. Increased scale. So this is the generic source of joint value. So increased scale increases scope. Can we improve coordination through this? Can we expand the options? So can we, with increased scale, can we save production costs, for example, or increase our marketing power from larger volumes of purchasing, for example, for larger organizations? Increased scope, are there savings to be made? Can we increase the demand from cross and joint selling? Improve coordination. Can we reduce the risk of dependence and hold up? This is very topical, isn't it? In the recent times of the shortages from COVID. And then the expanding our options. What are we doing with expanded options? How can we use a partnership to help us to hedge against uncertain outcomes? So again, you know, partnerships could really help with our, you know, difficult times we're in right now. I'm not going to skip that slide. So the second law is about governing the collaboration. So how do we do that? How do we manage the governance of this particular collaboration? Well, there are a number of ways of doing that, or a number of things that we need to do. That if you're going to collaborate with a third party, then you do need to have some form of agreement. Obviously, there'll be an investment involved in this. So the collaboration agreement should be something which could be a letter of intent or memorandum of understanding. A letter of intent and memorandum of understanding are very brief documents which just outline the intent of a particular type of collaboration. They tend to say organization A will do this, organization B will do this. The outcome is intended to be this. This will be potentially any investment that both party will make. A memorandum of understanding would be similar. And then the other document that would be required is a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA. An NDA is simply a document which says that if information is shared by about a particular prospect or customer, then it's not going to be shared with any third parties. So anything confidential that's shared between the partners is protected under this NDA. So the second thing is common vision or purpose. So what is it we're trying to achieve? What is the common vision? How are we going to build that picture of where we're trying to get to with this partnership? And what, if any, is the competitive overlap? So is there any? And if there is, how are we going to manage that? Because obviously you don't want to be in a situation where the competition becomes an issue in the collaboration. The third thing is, and this is very helpful, is to have a nominated lead on both sides. In small companies, it's less of an issue than it is in big companies, but nevertheless, there should be a nominated person on both sides who has, should we say, the most knowledge and interest in ensuring that that this is successful. And they're the go-to person for both parties. And then the fourth thing is agreed status reporting. So what are we going to report? So are we going to report every month? Are we going to report every quarter? If so, how are we going to report on the status of our collaboration? And what metrics are we using? How are we going to measure it? And maybe we don't need to measure it, but you know, is there, if we're not going to measure it, then let's agree not to measure it. Then review meetings. So with the Apple and IBM partnership, we had a quarterly business review. So every 3 months we would meet together for 2 hours, and we'd look at what successes we'd had, what challenges that we'd faced, because there are always some of those, and any plans for the next 3 months. So these review meetings were very helpful, very useful. They did have very good attendance by senior people on both sides of the collaboration. Sometimes you might need an escalation plan. So what does that mean? So when things go wrong, who do you talk to? Who are the people that potentially could help to resolve an issue should it occur? I put these in place on several occasions, never had to use them, which is good. And then the last thing is the education of the teams. Do we need to educate the teams? So it's all very well having some great ideas and the people involved understand that, but what about the wider organization? How do we need to inform them? And what's in it for them? What's their impact? So typically those are a few areas that are related to governing the collaboration. So the third law is about the created value. So what could that value of the collaboration be? What's the value to the end user or the customer? So, for example, the value for IBM was access to this enterprise market, so the business market that they at that particular moment didn't have a strong presence in. The value for IBM was to have access to the mobile marketplace, Apple design and hardware, so that was great for IBM. And the value for the customer was the power and scalability linked to the design and the Apple devices. And then the question is, you know, how are you going to measure it? And we measured it by the number of apps that we were selling. Apple were also monitoring the number of devices that were being sold, but they told us that that wasn't the key metric for them. And it was all about presence in the market. And actually for them, really, it was about market share. So just to summarize this life cycle around partnering, there are a number of phases in the development of a partnership. First phase is the partner identification and development. So that's where you do the selection, or you do the identification and selection. You look at the resources that both parties have. What do they have to offer? You probably have some discovery meetings. You put in place this non-disclosure agreement and or the memorandum of understanding or letter of intent. So just you have some kind of plan that you're creating and you're articulating in this MOU or LOI. The next thing is you implement it, and sometimes you might need a partnership agreement, which is perhaps a little bit more formal than an MOU or LOI, which, by the way, are not legally binding. They're statements of intent rather than anything else. There is the governance aspect to it. You know who's the lead person on both sides. You know, let's agree the status reporting. Let's ensure that the teams are educated so that we know who who has the knowledge of this, and they can articulate that that partnership to a broader community. And then finally, the evaluation of performance. What about our objectives? Are we meeting them? How could we improve? What's changed? How could we move that forward? So what about getting this whole thing started? So it's all very well sitting here and with a whiteboard or a piece of paper and writing down what actually really wanted to work with this particular organization for these reasons. How do you then start? Well, it has to start by initially, or often starts with an email. Although yesterday I was talking to somebody and he was talking about a partnership that he was involved with, and he met another organization at a networking event, and they quickly came to the conclusion that they had some areas of joint interest. So they didn't start with an email, but they started with a conversation. But ultimately, it will start between two people talking, whether that's initiated by an email, by a phone call, or whatever. And it probably means that one needs to explain the idea to the other. So this is what I've got in mind. What do you think? Then perhaps go and have an initial meeting, and perhaps a workshop to look at this, and to kind of dive into it in a little bit more detail. So looking at the pros and cons, trying to understand exactly the implications for both sides. Obviously, what you're trying to do at this stage is to generate some momentum behind this, but also establish the trust, because trust is extremely important in any partnership. And you need to be honest as well, because clearly it's not worth, if you don't see mileage in something, then probably it's good to say, this is not a direction that I think is going to be helpful right at this particular moment, and maybe you can suggest an alternative. But be upfront, be honest, be open as much as you can. Look at your objectives, and what's in it for both parties. What are you both trying to achieve, and how can you help each other to achieve that? And could you achieve whatever it is that you're looking to achieve with internal resources, or do you need some kind of external support? And if so, what support would you need? And do you know who could help in terms of this collaboration? And have you talked to them already? And what about a workshop? So there are some questions there that could be asked of any potential partner. Ultimately, though, it's about starting with a conversation and seeing whether there is some synergy there. And it's obviously to do with more than just the joint proposition. Culturally, do you think that there's a match between the two organizations? Because if there isn't, then it can lead to some difficult conversations. And typically there are always, a few bumps in the road with anything like this, but nevertheless, if there's a will or intent to make a success out of something, then it's a great starting point. So I'm going to finish with a few key principles. So the first principle is that it has to be a win-win. So there has to be something in it for both parties. It's all about relationships, as I've mentioned before. So trust is always a key element of this. And if you don't have trust, then it's not going to work. But trust is really, really important. Commitments, obviously stick to them. And if you can't tell, put your hand up and say, look, I'm sorry, this is a commitment I made, but I'm not going to be able to deliver on it. So at least both parties have a chance to adjust the plan. Agree what success looks like for both parties. So in terms of how you move forward. So what would success be? So with IBM, they wanted to deliver something new and exciting to their existing clients and new clients. For Apple, they were looking at market presence in the enterprise. So that's what they were looking for. And they weren't hard and fast objectives necessarily. They were a little bit, they were aspirations more than anything else. But success needs to be articulated from both parties. If you don't have sponsorship from the highest level of the organization, and it could be a one-person organization, or it could be a 500-person or 1,000-person organization, it really needs to get support from the top, because if you don't have support from the top, then when you're asking for investment or something of that sort, then you won't get it. So sponsorship needs to happen from the top of the organization, in my experience. You need to also agree and discuss what resources and expertise each party can offer to the other, and to the bigger picture. Simplify. So if possible, keep it simple. And this is the sign that Apple have in their building. Simplify, 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 with 2 simplifies crossed out. So the idea really is keep it as simple as possible. The moment it becomes complex or the proposition becomes difficult to articulate, then it's going to be difficult to deliver. So it should be relatively simple. And the examples that I've given today are relatively simple, whether it's coming from the Ford and Centrica collaboration around electric vehicles and electric vehicle infrastructure, or the Toast and Warburton's example, or EAT example, where it's waste or food waste being used to brew beer. Then they're fairly simple propositions. So that brings me to the end of the presentation. I don't know if there are any questions, but if there are, then perhaps you'd like to unmute and ask a question.
Thank you, Hugh. That was very interesting. And likewise, if anyone's got any general questions relating to BBF, I'm happy to take a little Q&A at the end as well. Hugh, I have a question.
Yes.
I was interested to read about the Ford and Centrica tie-up when it was announced as well, and what you said was very interesting. How do you see that developing in the future with other suppliers as EVs become a more central part of the market?
Well, I think that Centrica are positioning themselves with Ford, but also they've got a tie-up with Lotus, I mentioned as well. So I think they are trying to establish themselves as a key partner of organizations that are moving or that are selling electric vehicles. And I'm sure that other utilities will also emerge as with similar offers. But it's always, an organization that comes out with the first offering, and it may be that the utilities will work together on this. That would be great to see. Plus, there are other third parties also entering this EV infrastructure market as well. When I spoke to Centrica about this a couple of weeks ago, they'd obviously made the announcement, and it wasn't clear on how they were going to actually address that. I was asking that question as well. So, for example, when the electric vehicle was acquired from Ford, would a customer be able to buy and order the infrastructure at the same time from Centrica? And it wasn't clear at that stage that was going to be the case, but I'm assuming that it will be, but for that particular moment. And it's like, you know, I have to say, it's, you know, the thing about a partnership, it does evolve, so things change over time. So I would expect that at some point, maybe Ford will be selling Centrica EV charging infrastructure, and perhaps even Centrica might be supporting Ford with their sales as well. So, I mean, one of the things about the electric vehicle infrastructure is that Ford clearly saw that as a barrier to customers buying electric vehicles. You know, there was a concern of, if they bought an EV, then how would they implement the charging? And it does make it simpler for an end customer if they have an organization that's already there in the frame that can provide that infrastructure that will work with that particular electric vehicle.
Yeah, I'm aware that there's other players in the market, aren't there? Like Octopus Energy.
Yes.
They have like a bundle, don't they, where you can they'll give you a Nissan Leaf 40 kilowatts, 100% renewable electricity from Octopus, a free charger and a free smart meter all together. You know, the whole package for a fee per month. I think it's £225 a month. And it was quite an interesting bundle that I read about. They were quite quick off the mark, I think, doing that. And it's interesting how that market will develop for the commercial sector as well, I think.
I think you're right. And Octopus is a very interesting organization and very innovative in that they're a new entrant to the market, and they're putting some really interesting propositions out there. I saw that they were also supplying vans, electric vans, to another organization, which were essentially as you say, EV plus power plus everything else for this fee, which was a kind of van as a service type of scenario, which was really, really interesting. So I think, you know, there are going to be lots of tie-ups of this type of nature in the future.
Yeah, I was thinking there should be a tie-up for electric taxi drivers, because the low carbon workspaces scheme used to be able to help with LEVC purchases when they were new on the market, and it was decided we wanted to encourage take up of those electric taxis, despite the high cost. I think they're nearly £50,000 a taxi, but hopefully that will come down with a bit of market competition from is it the Nissan Dynamo, I think it's called now, although I think they've priced themselves at the same level. But anyway, and there's already some interesting charging infrastructure in London, especially for electric taxis. I think you can become a member and get reduced rates, etc., and know that you've got a spot, and the spot is bookable. But really, they need a good tariff for their home address as well, so they can charge the taxi cheaply overnight. And yeah, it'd be interesting if LEVC sort of see that potential there. I saw that as a potential partnership earlier on, but it's not my place to approach LEVC and think you should offer this. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Anyway, there's one from me.
No, great. So thank you very much, Matthew. I don't know if there are any other questions or comments. If not, then thank you very much for joining this call. I hope it's been useful and interesting. If you've got any further questions, then please do email or call me. Happy to support in any way I can. And I think I will try and stop the call. So thank you very much for joining.
Thank you, Hugh. Will there be a recording available to download or watch later?
Yes,
I think
yes,
BPF will provide one.
yes, there will.
Thank you very much. All right. Well, thank you for joining, Carrie. And thank you, Hugh, for an excellent presentation. Hope to
Thank
see
you.
more in the future.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.